You know how some people say they'd do anything for their kids? Well, sometimes anything includes saving yourself first. I'm Roxy, I'm 28, and I need to tell you about the biggest decision I ever made. One that everyone seems to think makes me some kind of heartless person. But here's the thing nobody wants to acknowledge. Sometimes being a good mother means taking care of yourself first, even if that looks selfish from the outside. I had my twins Liam and Cole when I was 21. 21. Most girls my age were still figuring out their majors and getting wasted at parties, and there I was, changing diapers at 3 a.m. while Landis got to keep living his normal life. Don't get me wrong, he helped with the practical stuff. Bottles, bedtime routines, all that basic care. But he didn't understand what it felt like to lose yourself completely overnight. One day I'm this college student with dreams and plans. The next I'm trapped in this tiny apartment that constantly smells like formula and baby powder. Then 14 months later, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment, along came Ruby. 3 kids under 2 years old. 3? Do you have any idea what that's like? It's like being in survival mode 24/7, except there's no end in sight. Everyone kept telling me how blessed how lucky to have healthy babies, but nobody seemed to notice that I was disappearing piece by piece. My parents have always been comfortable financially, so money wasn't the issue. They made sure we had everything we needed, the best baby gear, a nice place to live, all that stuff. But you can't buy your identity back with money. You can't purchase the person you used to be before your entire existence became about keeping tiny humans alive and happy. The postpartum depression hit me like a freight train after Ruby was born. I'd wake up every morning feeling like I was suffocating, like these 4 walls were going to be my entire world forever. Landis would leave for his job. Something with computers, I never really paid attention to the details, and I'd be stuck there with 3 babies who needed constant attention. No adult conversation, no mental stimulation, just endless cycles of feeding and changing and soothing. When I told Landis I needed to go stay with my parents for a while to clear my head, he actually looked relieved. That should have told me everything I needed to know about where our relationship stood. So I packed a bag and went home to my childhood bedroom, thinking a few weeks would be enough to reset. But sitting there surrounded by all my old things, my travel magazines, the Europe guidebooks I'd collected in college, something shifted inside me. I remembered who I used to be before motherhood consumed everything. I'd always planned to take a gap year to backpack through Europe, but I'd gotten a full scholarship to my dream school instead. Seemed stupid to pass it up at the time, but now I realized I'd never actually lived for myself, not really. That's when it hit me. This was my chance. Not just to get better, but to finally experience the life I'd always wanted. The life I'd put on hold for school, then for pregnancy, then for babies. At some point, don't you deserve to live for yourself? I called Landis from my parents' house and told him I needed more than a few weeks. I needed a couple of months in Europe to really heal and find myself again. Of course, he flipped out, started going on about how the kids needed their mom and how we should work through this together. But that's easy to say when you're not the one who's been drowning for 2 years straight. Landis, I told him, I'm not any good to them like this. I need to get healthy, mentally and emotionally. A few months to rediscover who I am, and I'll come back ready to be the mom they deserve. My parents understood. Mom even said she wished she'd had the courage to prioritize her mental health when she was raising kids. Dad arranged everything. Flights, accommodations, travel insurance. They knew I needed this, that I couldn't keep living like some shell of a person just because society expects mothers to sacrifice everything. The healing journey. The first few months in Europe were exactly what my soul needed. Paris, Rome, Barcelona. I was finally living instead of just surviving. I'd wake up in a new city and the day would be completely mine. No one needed me to change their diaper or find their favorite stuffed animal or break up a fight over toys. I could eat at a cafe and read a book without interruption. I could walk through museums at my own pace, strike up conversations with interesting people, stay out late without worrying about early morning feedings. Landis called constantly at first, always at the worst times too. right when I'd made new friends or was about to explore somewhere amazing. He'd send pictures of the kids, updates about their milestones, asking when I was coming home. The guilt trips were relentless. But here's what I didn't expect. The guilt I thought would consume me never really came. Instead, I felt free. Genuinely free for the first time since college. I could make decisions based on what I wanted to do, not what three tiny humans needed every second of the day. I could have adult conversations about art and politics and travel instead of discussing sleep schedules and pediatrician appointments. My parents were funding everything, obviously, and they understood that healing takes time. Real healing, not just a quick vacation. Mom called every week to check in, and she always sounded so proud when I'd tell her about the places I'd seen, the people I'd met. "You sound like yourself again," she'd say, and she was right. The calls from Landis gradually slowed down, then stopped altogether around month 6. I figured he was finally giving me the space I needed to heal, maybe even realizing that this break was good for everyone. The kids were resilient, they always are. And Landis had always been better at the day-to-day parenting stuff anyway. Then Mom dropped a bomb during one of our weekly calls. Landis had filed for full custody. I was furious. Not because I wanted to rush back. I wasn't ready, nowhere near ready, but because he didn't even tell me he was planning it. That felt like such a betrayal, honestly. We were supposed to be partners in this, and he made this huge legal decision without even discussing it with me first. Well, I told Mom, if he wants to play hardball, fine. I'm not going to let his manipulation tactics guilt me into coming home before I'm actually better. So that's exactly what I did. I'd already been gone this long. What was a little longer? I deserved to really see the world, not just get a taste and then go back to the same suffocating routine that had nearly destroyed me. I extended my trip, started really exploring. Australia, Thailand, South America. Places I'd only dreamed about visiting. My Instagram finally became worth following again instead of just endless pictures of kids covered in food. I was posting sunsets from Santorini, street art from Buenos Aires, temple visits in Bangkok. Real experiences, the kind that expand your mind and feed your soul. Building a new life. 2 years turned into something bigger when I met this amazing group of travelers in Thailand. Real free spirits who understood that life is meant to be lived, not just endured. One of them, this guy Trevor, who ran an international school, offered me a teaching position. It felt like the universe telling me I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The kids were clearly doing fine without me. Landis had always been the more hands-on parent anyway. And this was my chance to build something for myself. Something that wasn't about being someone's mom or girlfriend, but about being a complete person with my own goals and achievements. I sent Landis an email explaining that I'd found this incredible opportunity and would be staying longer to really establish myself professionally. He didn't even respond, which honestly hurt more than I expected, but I pushed through it. This was about my growth, my future, my ability to eventually return as a whole person instead of the broken mess I'd been when I left. 3 years in Thailand flew by like a dream. The teaching job was perfect. Challenging work that actually used my brain, amazing travel opportunities during school breaks, and I was making a real difference in these kids' lives. Real impact, not just wiping noses and breaking up sibling fights all day. I explored all over Asia during holidays. Learned to scuba dive in the Philippines, did yoga teacher training in Bali, took cooking classes in Vietnam. I was becoming the person I'd always been meant to be, and that crushing guilt I'd carried about leaving just disappeared. The kids were resilient. They always are. And they probably barely remembered me anyway at this point, which was honestly a relief. From what I could see on Landis's rarely updated social media, they looked happy and healthy. He'd post the occasional photo of them at a park or birthday party, and they were smiling, seemed well-adjusted. See? I'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is remove yourself from a situation where you're not your best self. My parents were so proud of how far I'd come. "You sound so confident now," Mom would say during our calls. "So sure of yourself. This experience has been exactly what you needed." The teaching contract in Thailand was supposed to end after 3 years, but they offered me a permanent position. Head of the English department, significant pay raise, real authority and respect. It was tempting, really tempting. But something inside me was finally ready to go home. Not because I felt guilty or pressured, but because I was genuinely excited to share this new version of myself with my kids. 5 years felt like the right amount of time. Long enough to completely transform myself, short enough that the kids would still be young enough to rebuild our relationship. I was ready to be the kind of mother they deserved, confident, worldly, emotionally healthy. Someone who chose to be there instead of someone who felt trapped. The rude awakening. Moving back in with my parents felt weird at first, but it was temporary until I figured out my next steps. I'd saved money from teaching abroad, had all these amazing experiences to share, and felt more like myself than I ever had. The plan was simple. Ease back into the kids' lives, show Landis that I was a completely different person now, and start building the kind of family dynamic we should have had all along. That's when I reached out to Landis about visitation. Just something casual to start. Maybe taking the kids for lunch, getting to know them again gradually. I figured he'd be relieved to have some help after managing everything alone for so long. He shut me down completely, flat out refused to let me see them. "After 5 years?" he said when I called. "You think you can just waltz back in like nothing happened?" I tried to explain that this wasn't about nothing happening. This was about me becoming the person I needed to be before I could be a good mother to them. But he wouldn't listen. He'd gotten comfortable playing the single dad hero role, and clearly my return threatened that narrative. "Landis, I'm their mother," I reminded him. "That doesn't just disappear because of time and distance. I needed to heal myself before I could take care of anyone else properly." But he'd made up his mind. Said the kids didn't even ask about me anymore, that they'd moved on. Which was probably true. Kids are adaptable like that. But that also meant there was room for me to build new relationships with them based on who I was now, instead of who I'd been when I left, when I threatened to take legal action for custody rights, because honestly, what choice did he give me? He started laughing. Actually laughing. Like the idea of me having any parental rights was some kind of joke. "Good luck with that," he said, and then hung up on me. That's when things got really ugly. A few days later, he sent me an email with dozens of photos attached. Screenshots from my Facebook, my Instagram, my travel blog, pictures of me at beach parties in Croatia, holding drinks in Prague, looking happy and carefree in Thailand. Like being happy and having fun was somehow criminal behavior for a mother. He'd been watching my social media for years, apparently, building a case against me while I was busy rebuilding myself. The manipulation was unreal, taking my healing journey and twisting it into evidence that I was some kind of irresponsible party girl who'd abandoned her kids to go have fun. My parents finally told me the truth about how things had been while I was gone. Apparently, Landis had turned my absence into some kind of community charity case. His family, his friends, the neighbors, everyone had rallied around the poor, abandoned, single dad narrative. People bringing meals, babysitting for free, helping with everything from yard work to birthday parties. It was disgusting how easily everyone bought into that victim story without considering my side of things. Nobody asked about my mental health, about how suffocating and overwhelming those early years had been. They just saw the surface. Mom leaves, dad struggles, kids adapt. Such a simple, convenient story that made Landis look like a saint and me look like a selfish monster. The legal nightmare. The custody battle was a nightmare from day one. Landis's lawyer had 5 years of documentation. My social media posts, travel records, the fact that I hadn't contributed financially while I was away building my new life. Meanwhile, my lawyer kept asking about my relationship with the children and how I planned to rebuild trust. Like I needed to rebuild anything with my own kids. The worst part was how Landis had poisoned everyone against me. My own parents, who'd supported my travels and understood my need for space and healing, suddenly started making comments about responsibility and consequences. Even they were buying into this narrative that I'd done something wrong by prioritizing my mental health and personal growth. During one of the court hearings, I got to see the real extent of Landis's documentation project. He'd kept records of everything, every missed birthday, every holiday I wasn't there for, every milestone I'd experienced through photos instead of in person. But he conveniently left out all the context. He didn't mention my postpartum depression. He didn't mention that our relationship was already falling apart before I left. The judge looked at me like I was some kind of alien species when I tried to explain that sometimes people need to find themselves before they can be good parents. That personal growth and self-discovery aren't selfish luxuries. They're necessary for mental health and becoming a whole person. Your Honor, I said during my testimony, I was suffering from severe postpartum depression and had lost all sense of who I was outside of being a mother. I needed time to heal and rediscover my identity so I could return as a better person and parent. But apparently, wanting more out of life than endless diaper changes and cartoons makes you unfit for motherhood in the eyes of the law. The whole system is designed to punish women who refuse to sacrifice every aspect of themselves for their children, even when that sacrifice would ultimately hurt everyone involved. The social worker assigned to our case was this bitter woman who clearly had her own issues with working mothers. She kept using the word abandoned, no matter how many times I corrected her. You abandoned your children for 5 years, she'd say, like my mental health journey was just some selfish vacation. The final custody ruling felt predetermined. Landis got to keep full custody, and I was granted supervised visitation once a month. Once a month. Like I was some kind of danger to my own children, instead of a mother who'd done the hard work of healing herself so she could show up authentically. Facing the consequences. Supervised visits meant sitting in some sterile office with a social worker watching every interaction, taking notes about whether I was appropriate with my own kids. The boys, now 7, were polite but distant. Ruby, 6 years old, kept asking why I'd been gone for so long. When I tried to explain that Mommy had needed time to get better, the social worker cut me off. That's not appropriate conversation for a supervised visit, she said. Like honesty was somehow damaging to children. The kids didn't remember me the way I remembered them. They'd formed their own little world with Landis, had inside jokes and routines I wasn't part of. During our hour-long visits, they'd answer my questions politely, but seemed more interested in the toys in the room than in reconnecting with me. Do you remember when we used to read bedtime stories? I asked Ruby during one visit. She shook her head. Daddy reads to me now. He does different voices for all the characters. Of course he did. He'd had 5 years to perfect his parenting routine while I was off becoming a better person. 5 years to be their whole world while I was discovering mine. What really burns me up is how he completely rewrote our history to make himself the victim. According to everyone who'll listen, he's this amazing single dad who stepped up when his irresponsible ex ran off to party around the world. Never mind that he was always better with the practical parenting stuff anyway. Never mind that I was drowning in postpartum depression, and he offered 0 emotional support. The kids barely know me now, which is exactly what he wanted. During our monthly supervised visits, they're polite, but treat me like some distant relative they have to be nice to. Ruby asked me once why I went away for so long, and when I tried to give her an age-appropriate explanation about Mommy needing time to feel better, the social worker interrupted. It's maddening how the system works. If I'd stayed and continued being depressed and resentful, they would have criticized me for not being emotionally available. If I'd had a breakdown and hurt myself or the kids, they would have said I should have gotten help sooner. But when I actually did the responsible thing and removed myself from a toxic situation to get healthy, I'm labeled an unfit mother. Women can't win in this society. We're either selfish for having needs and boundaries, or we're martyrs who've completely lost ourselves in motherhood. I chose option 3. I chose to become a whole person first, then figure out how to be a mother from that place of strength and self-knowledge. Everyone acts like those 5 years were just some extended vacation, but they were the most important years of my life. I traveled to over 30 countries, learned 3 languages, built a successful career, made lifelong friendships with incredible people from around the world. I transformed from a depressed, overwhelmed girl into a confident, capable woman with real experiences and perspectives to offer. The monthly visits are awkward and forced. The kids have their own lives now, their own routines and relationships that don't include me. Liam is into soccer, Cole loves art class, Ruby is learning piano. They tell me about these things politely, like they're making conversation with a stranger, which I guess is what I am to them now. Landis has done such a thorough job of painting me as the villain that even my own parents have started questioning my choices. They still love me, obviously, but there's this underlying disappointment now, like they think I should have handled things differently. They supported my travels at the time, even funded them, but now that there are consequences, they're backing away from that support. No regrets. The thing that really gets me is how everyone acts like Landis is some kind of saint for doing basic parenting. Meanwhile, I'm expected to grovel and beg for forgiveness for taking time to become a better person. If the situation were reversed, if I'd stayed with the kids and he'd taken off for 5 years, he would have been crucified. But because he's a man who stepped up, he gets praised for doing what mothers are just expected to do without recognition. I don't regret those 5 years. They were the best, most fulfilling years of my life. I got to experience things most people only dream about, became fluent in multiple languages, built meaningful relationships with people from completely different cultures. I turned myself from a barely functioning young mom into a worldly, accomplished woman with real-life experience. The kids are fine. They're thriving, actually, from what I can see during our visits. They're confident, well-adjusted, happy. They have a father who clearly adores them, and a whole support network of people who care about them. That's more than a lot of kids get, honestly. And you know what? They got that because I had the courage to step away when I wasn't my best self. If I'd stayed in that depression, stayed trapped in that suffocating routine, they would have grown up with a mother who resented her life and felt bitter about all the opportunities she'd missed. Instead, they got stability and consistency with a parent who wanted to be there. Maybe in a few years, when they're older and can understand complex emotions and mental health, they'll appreciate what I did. They'll understand that sometimes love means making hard choices, even when those choices look selfish from the outside. So yeah, everyone can keep playing their victim games and acting like I'm some kind of heartless person. I know the truth. I saved myself, and that took more courage than any of them will ever understand. The kids are fine. Landis got exactly what he wanted, and I became the person I was always meant to be. That's a win in my book, even if nobody else sees it that way. I'm not going to apologize for choosing my mental health, for refusing to sacrifice my entire identity on the altar of motherhood, or for believing that I deserve to live a full life too. Everyone else can stay stuck in their narrow ideas about what mothers should and shouldn't do. I'll keep being the woman who had the guts to save herself first.